Welcome to AI Snacks with Romy and Robbie, an AI literacy podcast translating AI and robotic technologies from difficult to easy to understand. Today's AI snack is highly interesting for those who are working in healthcare or wishing to study medicine. We dive into one of the most expensive and critical parts of healthcare, and this is clinical trials. Bringing a new medicine to market often takes more than a decade and costs billions, with much of the time and money lost to slow patient recruitment, complex protocols, data quality issues, and regulatory friction. Artificial intelligence is starting to change this equation. From smarter trial design and site selection to automated data capture and monitoring to predictive analytics that can spot problems early and keep studies on track. And my guest is Julio Martinez-Clark, a leader working at the intersection of clinical research and advanced technologies. Together, we explore how AI can help sponsors such as pharmaceutical companies and clinicians design better trials, match the right patients faster, and streamline operations in ways that reduce cost and shrink time to market. And this all can happen without compromising safety or scientific rigor. Julio spent decades in clinical trials, and he understands what AI can do to improve the status quo. Let me open the studio to welcome Julio, and please take a cup of coffee and your favorite snack, lean back and enjoy a wonderful conversation with a true expert in healthcare and clinical trials, Julio Martinez-Clark. Julio Martinez-Clark, welcome to my show.
Thank you, Anastassia. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely. And I'm very passionate about AI in healthcare. And you are busying yourself with a very important aspect. And this is about clinical trials. Tremendously important to bring new medications to the market. But for those among us muggles who don't understand the pharma industry and the medical space, could you please describe in simple language what clinical trials are and what the value chain behind them is?
Well, clinical trials are the bridge between labs and life-saving treatment. That's a simple way to put it. In other words, scientists develop something in a lab, call it a medical device, call it a molecule for a new drug, and the clinical trial is a vehicle, is a bridge that brings them to the market. In other words, you cannot simply bring a drug or a device to a hospital and put it on patients. That's unethical, it's illegal. You have to go through a series of tests or trials to understand the safety and the efficacy of the device. Otherwise, the regulators meaning the FDAs of the world, the EMAs, which is the European Medicine Agency, and every country has a different regulator, the Ministry of Health of different countries, they need to ensure that whatever is put in the market, devices or drugs, are safe and efficacious. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to put them on patients. So the value chain, as I kind of alluded to, consists of course, the regulators, who are kind of the police officers, to make sure that the scientists who represent or are inside companies, like pharma companies or medical device companies, these are the companies that have a financial interest in developing the device or the molecule because it's going to be sold for a lot of money in the market for years to come. And it's going to save lives, and it's going to benefit everybody in society. So you have the regulators, you have the manufacturers of the drug or developers of the drug or the device, and then you have the contract research organizations, who are the facilitators or the middlemen. In other words, these are a layer of companies that sit below the sponsor of the clinical trial, which is, as I said, the manufacturer of the device or the drug. Then the CRO helps the manufacturer choosing the investigators and the hospitals, which are also part of the supply chain. So now you have the manufacturer, the CRO in the middle, and then the CRO sits on top of the hospital with the investigator and the patients. And then you also have the regulators on the other side, making sure that everybody is playing with the same rules. So that's kind of the summary of what a clinical trial is and the value chain and the actors behind the trials.
And Julio, help me understand, probably depending on the market conditions and the legislation, so this value chain is structured slightly differently. I guess guys like Roche, so very, very large companies, they might go to the patients directly because they're so big and they have contacts everywhere, and smaller manufacturers might use specialists to approach patients. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct. But in most cases, the industry started that way years ago. But the industry has realized that everybody has a core competency, right? So the pharma companies realized that they need to focus their efforts in developing new drugs, getting them out of the door, so that somebody else, the CRO, in my case, that's what I represent, the CRO takes over. The manufacturer, the pharma company, outsources all clinical trial operations and execution and logistics and regulatory submissions to a third party, because they understood that if you have one trial, you probably can do it on your own, right, with your stuff. But you have 1,000 trials going around the world. That's really not your core competency. You need to subcontract or outsource that to a third party, and that's why we have a multi-billion-dollar CRO industry in the world, like IQVIA, PPD, Parexel. These are companies the size of Microsoft, the size of Google. It's just nobody talks about them unless you're in the industry.
Right, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And help me understand the local aspect of this, because I'm just imagining, for example, AI, which is actually the subject of our conversation,
Yes.
is being frequently used in the Chinese healthcare. And one of the reasons is that simply the system lacks human doctors. So a lot of population, demographical decline. And in certain health conditions, there aren't so many doctors to serve that many patients. So obviously, they use AI. And let's say AI is strong and new medications are being developed. So you have tons of patients to test in clinical trials. But this is China. And let's say Brazil then use the same data, or is it forbidden? Help me understand how the location play a role and how much of the local data is needed for the regulator to say, okay, we're fine, this will work in our environment, in our country, and our population, approved.
It is important to understand that clinical trials are about generating evidence doctors can trust. That's the key message here. It's about generating evidence that doctors can trust. So if I do a trial, and I don't want to sound derogatory or anything, if I do a trial in Zambia or Haiti, no doctor will trust the conduction of the trial in those locations because of political, economic reasons, poverty reasons, lack of infrastructure. It's not really a trustworthy origin for the data, right? But if I tell a regulator anywhere in the world that I did a clinical trial in the United States, that I did it in Mayo Clinic or Johns Hopkins, that has a lot of credibility. So again, it's about generating evidence that doctors can trust so that they can recommend the innovation to their patients. Because it's also important to understand that if I am a key opinion leader in a hospital anywhere in the world, and I have respect, I have credibility among my peers and my patients and my coworkers, etc., I'm not going to risk my reputation by recommending a new product that hasn't been properly tested or doesn't have the right evidence that I can trust. So you have an issue there that you really, really need to convince doctors. One thing is to convince a regulator, right? And the regulators are more open to accepting data from anywhere in the world, pretty much. Just a few countries have local requirements for data, meaning that I don't care if you did you try in the United States. I want you to test your product with my national, with my domestic population. Just very few countries. Most countries in the world have realized that it's a lot easier and faster because there are life-saving drugs. I mean, if we wait for this company to test the product again, but they did 50 trials in Europe and the United States, and if we wait for them to test the product again in my local population, then it's going to delay the process 3 more years. My patients are dying. We need this drug. So they're opening the doors to accepting foreign clinical data. That's how it's called, foreign clinical data. And what you do as a manufacturer is you do the trial in such a way that you follow international guidelines and that you publish the results of the trial in top magazines like New England Journal of Medicine, Nature, and of course, the investigators and the hospital that participated in the trial are top facilities that can withstand any scrutiny. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of the
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it makes me think once again about trust and reputation. And those are actually hard currencies in the age of AI. And particularly, it's important because human health is at question. But let's now come to the patient identification steps.
Yeah.
So if you take technologies like AI, how can this data technology enable patient identification? I'm just really thinking about mining of medical records, predicting some bottlenecks to recruit those patients. Just to give you some insight, sometimes for those among us who are not doctors, we just think, oh, maybe those patients are someone who is male, young, and sit on some student campus. And then obviously they are being confronted with one or another drug, but they're healthy. What might happen? Nothing. And against, if, for example, I'm working with a cohort of elderly patients with diabetes and some conditions which might kind of, have some collisions with whatever is being recognized there in a trial, then my results will be different. So help me understand how can technology help in this patient identification process?
Yeah. The first idea to understand is that recruitment is the Achilles heel of a clinical trial. It is proven that most trials, actually about more than 80% of trials, are delayed by recruitment. And around 11% of sites in a trial, of clinical research sites in a trial, enroll 0 patients. So this represents a lot of money in delays, etc. So AI brings proactive, intelligent matching, which we didn't have before, because now we have these machines that can get into databases, large databases, and they can match the inclusion and exclusion criteria of the trial, because every trial has a very specific and narrow inclusion and exclusion criteria. For example, males between 18 years old and 35 years old with hypertension, with diabetes, and this and that. So it has to be a very, very narrow inclusion and exclusion criteria, because you are really testing the product in a narrow population so that you can control the external factors. So imagine if you're a hospital and you have the research department within the hospital, and you have the electronic medical record of the hospital, right? Which is the system that runs the patient records and all that. It's all electronic. Used to be on paper. Now, in most countries, it's now electronic. And if I am the research department and my investigators are busy seeing patients, my investigators are not full-time investigators. They also see patients, because we need to charge insurance companies for seeing patients, because that's how the hospital makes money. So the hospitals usually come from the insurance companies bringing patients to the hospital. So if I am an investigator and also a regular doctor, and I see this large volume of patients, I cannot have in my head the 50 trials that my research department at my hospital is running right now. It's just impossible for a human to have the inclusion and exclusion criteria and the protocol of each one of the 50 trials that the hospital is running. So I need to rely on technology. And that's really the breakthrough change that AI is bringing to clinical research. Now we're going to be able to bring AI into the EMRs of hospitals. We feed the AI algorithm with the protocols and the inclusion and exclusion criteria. And we also feed the database, the EMR database, and then it does the match. So if I am a doctor, I'm seeing a patient and I entering the data, the patient is in front of me, I'm entering the data, and then the system will alert me, will put an alert on me, hey, doctor, whatever, the patient that you have in front of you is a great candidate for this trial that we're running. So that makes a huge, huge difference. Without mentioning the geographical scalability of this. I can put the AI system not only on my hospital EMR record system, but also in many other hospitals around the city or around a state or around a country. So I can have great matching capabilities. And that also helps with diversity. Because the other issue with trials, as you probably know, is that they're underrepresented.
Yeah.
For example, in cardiovascular trials, all you see are male, white. You don't have female representation. So if you develop a drug with male whites, what about the Hispanic females? What about the Black females? So you need more diversity in clinical research, and AI is helping that, and also to identify patients.
And I guess that organization like yours possess special licenses because obviously in clinical trial, every dot on a graph is a real person. So
Yes.
there's some personal information involved, and this is subject to so many regulations worldwide.
Of course.
So
Of course.
if I am
yeah.
in Europe, just GDPR, all kind of regulations. So there's a
Yes.
specific law in the United States
HIPAA.
protecting
Yes.
health data. So that means that organizations like yours and pharmaceutical companies taking care of clinical trials, they have specialized permissions to access those data. Okay, so this is
Exactly.
tremendously
Yes.
interesting.
Exactly. And there's something called the anonymization of the data. You anonymize the data. So the hospital, of course, the hospital knows the name and the last name and everything about the patient, the personal health information. It's called HPI, health patient information. At least under HIPAA regulations in the United States, it's called health patient information, HPI. So HPI is protected at the hospital. So we as a contract research organization receive an anonymized database. So we don't know the names of the patient. We know the code. There's a code that the hospital generates, and we tell the hospital how we like to see the code. First name, last name, date, time, whatever. We come up with a code. And then that code is what we receive. So we never see the name of the patient.
This is really helpful to understand because there are all kind of fantasies related on how those trials are coming together. Could I ask you one question? Obviously, the regulatory process is always quite complex.
Yes.
And a lot of bureaucracy is involved. And I even don't want to criticize it. It's just, the amount of paperwork is there. Is AI reducing the portion of this administrative costs, and how far is this reduction going? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the first breakthrough in this specific topic that you are referring to, Anastassia, translation. And translation can have two meanings. One is the regular language translation. We need to translate a lot of documents. Usually these documents come from the United States, which is where the big pharmaceutical companies are, or from Europe. And they usually put these documents together in English, of course. And then we need to translate those documents to the local language where we're going to execute the trial. In Latin America, for example, we need to translate it to Spanish or Portuguese. That's the first layer when people talk about translation. But there's another layer that very few people talk about, which is, as you said at the beginning of the interview, explain to me in simple language that anybody can understand. So if I am explaining the trial to a person in Bolivia, in South America, who hasn't finished high school, who comes from the Andes, in a mountains, in a remote town in the Andes, that I know as the pharmaceutical company I can recruit patients from because they have the disease that I am researching or whatever, I have to translate the complex terminology, not only from English, Bolivian Spanish, because the Spanish is different from country to country, but also from the Bolivian Spanish that educated Bolivians speak and uneducated Bolivians speak in remote villages. And by the way, that language, that Spanish version of the language that they speak may be their second language, because probably they have a first language, which is a native language. It's a dialect or whatever. So anyway, the point is that you also need to translate complex scientific terminology to simple terminology that any patient can understand. Just to give you an example, usually a trial has a document called the patient informed consent. Patient informed consent. By law, by international regulations, every patient needs to receive a 30-page document with everything about the trial: exclusion criteria, the risk, the benefits, the information of the investigator, the insurance policy, the phone number. If something happens to them, they can call, emergencies, whatever. So it's a very complex document. So imagine somebody with little education in a remote village in Bolivia is not going to be able to understand the trial. So you are restricting the screening, the amount of the pool of patients that you can screen, because you don't have simple language translations of the documents, even though they are also in Spanish, the regional source language documents. So AI is helping this. Right now, there's a company in Australia called Clinials, which I love, and they have this platform where you upload a very complex clinical trial protocol, and they spit out the informed consent in very simple language, a 3-page informed consent with graphics, with an infographic type of layout that anybody can understand in their local language. So that's really thanks to AI.
I just admire human
Yeah.
innovation there, and I upload a simple domain expertise, because this is about it. Technology is a facilitator, but without deep domain expertise, this technology wouldn't be trained properly and function properly. And it's actually great. I've never heard about really localizing explanations to this extent, because, you know, if I use sometimes even Google Translate for random things, it's working, but when I need to be very specific, it's already shaky. And I don't want even to go into the spoken word and dialects and the accents, so there are tons of jokes, real life, you know, stories about it. Julio, you are a leader in first-in-human and early feasibility studies. So where does AI add the most value in early phase versus late stage clinical studies and research?
Well, I think for early phase, the most impact that AI is having is on detecting device. I specialize in first-in-human, mostly on medical devices. It can help with safety detection, meaning that it can predict the failure of a device. If we feed the engine, the algorithm with enough data, historical data, so that when I implant a device, it can help me predict if the device is going to be safe in that patient because of his or her comorbidities, et cetera, age, et cetera. And also that will help prevent adverse events, adverse reactions to the device. So I think that in itself is a huge impact that AI is having. And also, the other aspect is in adaptive design. With AI, I can quickly detect things that the human eye will not detect on images after I implant a device, for example. And then I can real quickly make an amendment. So that's something that it will have taken months, if not years, to detect if we only rely on humans. So yeah, I think those are the two main areas. There's another one called protocol optimization, where we can optimize protocols, especially now in the early phases. We need to ensure, because imagine the picture. You have these startup companies developing these molecules, these devices. They have invested $5 million, at least $3 to $5 million in developing this. They have spent about 5 to 7 years developing a device. That's usually the time it takes for a new product that comes out of a university and gets licensed out to a startup, and then it gets to a human, about 7 years. So you spend money, time, effort, you put together the team and everything, you're ready for the implantation of the device. And you need to make sure that the protocol is optimized. You need to make sure that the best brains in the world or in the universe have their input in the protocol. Now we can do that with AI because we have now a super intelligence at our disposal, right? We have the best brains in the world because AI was trained with books, with papers, etc. So you're not relying on humans to write the protocol, but now you're relying on the whole collective intelligence of humanity, the best scientific minds in the world, from Oxford, from Harvard, from MIT. Those
Absolutely.
are the people contributing to your protocol. So now the failure of early phase trials is going to be reduced because you have the best minds at your disposal.
I mean, this is such a huge progress, and this is such a chance, really,
Yes.
to reduce time to market
Yes.
and bringing these drugs to the market
Absolutely.
and those devices to the market. I just wonder because AI is an old technology. It's, let's say, since 40s, 50s where AI started. And we have 60, 70 years of AI evolution on our hands.
Yeah.
But the democratization of AI is pretty young. People started talking about it once ChatGPT launched in November 22. I guess that every use of every new technology is kind of, a bottleneck for many humans who are somehow products of habits. Do you see a lot of hesitance in humans when you come with your approach and you are open about using AI in what you do? Or is everyone more or less open and kind of, is welcoming this new approach to the clinical trials? So how would you describe the human factor now?
Yeah. I think in 2 years, nobody will be speaking about AI.
Okay.
I mean, the word AI will disappear, meaning that is slowly getting into our lives in everything, in our cell phones, in our computers, in our email, in everything that we do, that the word AI is going to be like, yeah, it's like nobody talks about fax machines anymore or email on the internet because they're already part of our lives. The terminology evolved, so now we're going to be speaking about something else because AI is going to be part of what we do. When transistors were invented, transistors were the buzzword for 10 years. But now nobody talks about transistors, but they are in every single of the devices that we have. So the same thing is going to happen with AI. It's going to be ingrained in every single human activity imaginable.
So Andrew Ng
Eventually,
is calling AI electricity, the new electricity.
exactly,
I think this
electricity,
is a very good
exactly.
comparison.
That's a great example, electricity. When electricity was invented, everybody was talking about electricity. I think it was on the front page of every newspaper 10 years after it was invented, something like that. But anyway, the point is that nobody's going to be speaking about AI in the next following years because it's so ingrained now in our lives. It's so ingrained in every industry, that if you as a worker, as a professional, you don't embrace AI, you're going to fall behind. As a company, you have to embrace AI. So I think everybody, at least in my peers, in my industry, it's already commonplace in every industry, in every one of the interactions where we can get AI involved.
I can't agree more, but I'm working with a lot of leaders across industries, and I'm very focused on AI literacy. And even this year, 2026, you see huge gaps in understanding and even forming expectations around what AI technologies can contribute and how to implement those and what they might mean, the workflows for recruiting strategy, for deploying workforce in whatsoever. How would you think about bringing AI into medical education, into medical schools? So what are your ideas here?
Well, I think it needs to be part of any curriculum nowadays. Look at what's happening with radiology, for example. If you don't embrace AI in medical education, specifically in reading images in diagnostics, you're going to fall behind as a doctor. I think the main message here is that AI is just a tool that any professional, including doctors, need to embrace for them to become better doctors. It's not about disappearing doctors or replacing doctors or anything like that. It's about every medical school embracing AI as a tool to make better doctors, right? That's how I see it. So I think that, well, based on my conversation with peers and doctors, themselves. They say that radiology, the role that we think about of a radiologist will disappear right now because it's going to be a different role. It's going to be more about interpreting something that AI already interpreted and confirming that. Same with primary care physicians. That role will disappear. As you said at the beginning of the interview, that there's these clinics in China that they are AI only. They have no doctors because there's really no need for those type of doctors. This is primary care. Now in ChatGPT, you have this healthcare specialized ChatGPT and Claude or Anthropic just released a similar one. So everybody's gonna be on this one bag. Medical education needs to adapt to AI and embrace the fact that doctors are gonna have a different role. They're not gonna disappear, but they're gonna have a different role. My brother is an interventional cardiologist, for example. He relies on his human skills to put the catheters inside the body to navigate the body of the patient. Robotics is threatening his career, his profession. So he's like, I'm gonna be replaced by these artificial intelligence-based robots. I mean, I don't know how they're gonna come out with because you need to have a very sensitive finger to measure the pressure. I don't know what it is, but he has, and everybody in his profession, they have this specialized skill where they can sense if they're in the right place, if they're hitting the right point in the human body to insert the catheter and to navigate through the arteries and stuff. Now surgery is being performed better by AI robotic surgery than humans. And same thing is going to happen with interventional cardiologists. So medical school needs to embrace AI somehow. I mean, they have to adapt
Yeah.
on the new roles that doctors are going to have now.
This is quite interesting, and I think it's quite a good way to actually come to the end of this conversation. And I would like to share my personal story, and I'm very grateful that you mentioned radiologists, because, in 2012, I had a mammography, and something was not quite to the liking of the doctor. I have a family history with breast cancer. So they did a probe. Once again, it was not quite clear. So they cut me off. So I had surgery, nothing was there. And then they simply closed everything. So, but I went through the surgery. So it was, I had to be out of work. I could not run for 2 weeks. So it was still some suffering involved, even without, let's say, huge.
It wasn't necessary.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking if this hospital, which was a formidable hospital in Bonn, was equipped with AI diagnostics, this might not have been needed. But I remember very well the radiologist who was kind of, really not talking to me. So he was completely overworked. He was very experienced. It was very clear, but he did not look at me once.
Yes.
He was busying himself with some papers. He needed to fill out forms.
Yeah.
It was pre-Microsoft Copilot or anything.
Yes.
Just dictate and make your notes with AI.
Big screens, dark rooms, big screens, bright colors in the screen, and they sit down looking for the spots in the image. Yeah, I know how it is.
Absolutely. And I captured this image of what happened to me personally when I wrote my first literacy book for families, Romy and Robbie. And there is one protagonist in this book, and this is a pigeon. And there is a reason why I took a pigeon. The reason is that in 2015, there was an experiment when the scientists let pigeon look at the X-ray screens, and they discovered that the pigeons were more sophisticated in spotting anomalies than humans. And now we are coming to a very important message. So the pigeon does not know what it is looking at.
Yeah.
So a pigeon does not know that this is breast cancer or whatever cancer. A pigeon is a pigeon. So it just, the biological properties of an eye allow this bird to see something which we can't see. So me, whatever, and radiologists might be too tired to see. And here's the point. So, what is really the role of a doctor? And when are we coming to the place that doctors will see the patient and talk to the patient instead of, frankly, busying themselves with bureaucracy and papers and all the above? And at the same time, how can we keep the skills of a medical professional alive if so many things are being taken over by AI? Because we can't survive, I think, without absolutely skilled human professional. And what does it mean to build an educational system which is still training humans, and they still invest over 10,000 hours in surgery?
Yeah.
But they are assisted, and sometimes they provide the room for those robots and technologies to perform what they're doing best. So this is, for me, still an open question. Even if I am in the core, I know technology will enter the medical world and it will be everywhere, but I'm struggling to see how educational systems will adapt and how humans will not lose what they are doing fantastically today.
Yeah, I think the key word here, or the framework that we need to discuss, or we as a society need to discuss in the medical world, and more specifically in the clinical trial world, is the automation is for efficiency. Humans are for empathy, right? Automation is for efficiency, humans for empathy. So you can have the machine do the data validation, the protocol deviation flags, the supply chain optimization, the document translation, languages or educational levels, data set analysis. But who's going to do the trust building? Who's going to do the cultural understanding? Who's going to do the emotional support? Who's going to do the judgment calls? Who's going to do the consent conversation with a patient? So the AI finds things on a huge data set, like an image is a huge data set, and then the humans talk to the patient. The humans enroll the patient on whatever needs to be done. In the case of a clinical trial, they enroll the patient in a clinical trial. In reference to engagement, the AI reminds humans about something. The humans follow up on concerns, right? On what those reminders were about. And the monitoring. AI flags issues to monitor, and the clinicians interpret, and they determine if it is worth following up or not. So anyway, the point is that I think the issue is that humans are going to become, doctors are going to become empathy builders with patients, because the AI is going to take care of all the automation. The review of images. I grew up with a radiologist. My father was a radiologist. I used to read images with him. And at that time, images were on the wall. You have to take a Kodak, right? Remember those days? A Kodak glass, like you take a picture, you take a huge Kodak thing. I used to go in the dark room with my father and put the thing in the acid, and then take the plastic thing where the images was reflected on, and then he had to put it on the wall with a light behind that and try to read what the patient had. Imagine, the false positives that they had at that time. And it's still happening now with the technology that we have, but with AI, that's going to disappear, and patients like you will not have to endure a surgery, a necessary surgery, and the cost of the healthcare system. The money that the healthcare system invested in you would have been money that should have been invested in a sick patient.
Absolutely. Or really in R&D and in
Exactly.
science, and in optimizing science. Absolutely.
Yes.
I think this is a fantastic way to close this episode. Julio, I'm very, very grateful for your time. I wish you best of success, best of luck. I think what you're doing is tremendously important. And just, my last question, if you see a young person who would like to become a medical doctor, what would you advise this person? And it must not be necessarily about AI, just anything what comes to your mind.
It's funny that you asked that, Anastassia, because my nephew is 16 years old and he's going to go to university for medical school next year.
My daughter is 16 years old and she's going to go to medical university
I'm
next year.
going through that conversation. And my brother, his father, as I said, he's an interventional radiologist. He trained at Harvard. He's one of the best in the Miami area in what he does. And he doesn't want him to go to medical school. That's the first thing. Yes, he doesn't want him to go to medical school. And second, He said, all right, but if you like medical school, if you really, really want to go to medical school, I support you, but you need to be very strategic. I want you to, and because of the AI, the conversation really started because of AI. And this overall conversation with younger people about is it really worth going to college nowadays? If you can learn a skill, if you become a great programmer, you don't have to be a computer scientist to become a great programmer, right? Things like that, because education is being re-evaluated. So we need to think what education is related. What's the reason to go to university? That's kind of the first thing. And then medical school is another topic. So, well, my brother's advice to my nephew is, well, if you want to become a doctor, I think it's better that you become a doctor entrepreneur, a businessman who knows how to navigate the medical world and take advantage of these technologies and come up with new ideas, new businesses, new diagnostic tools. Just don't be in a hospital from 7, 10 p.m. seeing patients and doing procedures, because a lot of that is going to disappear. So you have to somehow become a different doctor, different type of doctor, a doctor more for the 21st or 22nd century.
Yeah.
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 Wow. But I think it's a very interesting advice, and it relates once more to the fact that we can't survive in silos. And we need to innovate cross silos, cross verticals, cross industries. And AI is deeply horizontal. It
Yes.
detects everything and it
Yes.
offers tremendous
Everything.
opportunities
Yes.
without depriving us of our humanity. And by the
Exactly.
way, this is an effort. We should not be deprived of the humanity and invest in our humanity rather than,
Absolutely.
let's say,
Yeah.
hope that technology will somehow cut corners.
Yeah.
So, Julio, thank you so much once again. Best
My
of
pleasure,
luck, best
Anastassia.
of success. And that was another AI Snacks with Romy and Robbie. And I was your host, Anastassia, CEO and founder of AI Edutainment, an AI literacy company from Switzerland. And I will see you next week. Thank you.
Hi, Anastassia. Thank you so much.
Bye. And that concluded another episode of AI Snacks with Romy and Robbie, your place for bite-sized inspiration on how AI is shaping our world and our future. And before you go, here's something exciting. This October, we'll be sharing a special AI literacy project at the House of Lords in London, a milestone moment for our mission to make AI knowledge accessible to everyone. We'll be unveiling new insights, stories, and educational tools to empower leaders, educators, and families to navigate the age of intelligent technologies with confidence and creativity. And I'd love to bring your voice into this journey. If you have questions, reflections, or topics you'd like us to explore, set them our way. Your curiosity shapes our content. You can connect with us on aiedutainment.ai or through our LinkedIn community, where we are building an open, curious, and supportive space for AI learners of all backgrounds. And if you haven't yet grabbed your copy of Romy and Robbie and the Secrets of Sleep, our storytelling series that turns AI concepts into relatable adventures, please go on Amazon.com or on the book website www.romyandrobbie. It's a beautiful way to start or deepen your journey into AI literacy, whether for yourself, your team, or your family. And so I will see you next week. Stay curious, stay kind, and keep learning. Together, we are not just talking about AI, we are shaping its story. Thank you.